Hey, gorgeous! Welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast with Holly Wharton, which combines powerful strategies on how to upgrade your business mindset, along with practical business tips to grow your business. This podcast features solo shows with Holly and also interviews with inspiring women entrepreneurs from around the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. And now, here's your host, Holly Wharton.
Hello and welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast, episode 191. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm here with today's special guest, Rebecca Kane. Rebecca works with women to help them to deeply connect to themselves and the world around them so that they can embrace all of themselves and not just the pretty parts, leaving them feeling deeply rooted in who they are so they can show up and embody their true self. And the world is in desperate need of people, especially women, who are willing to go there and become whole again. I love this idea. Welcome, Rebecca.
Hi, Holly. It's great to be here.
I'm super excited because we're going to talk about how red tents can support women in business.
I know. Who would have thought, hey?
So why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about your background and your business journey and how you got to where you are today?
Oh, my goodness. My business journey started probably 17, 18 years ago.
Wow.
Whenever I say that, I'm like, I'm so old. but honestly, I'm not. No. And my business journey has really gone full circle. It started off in complementary therapies, and I still practice now kinesiology. So that's where my heart is. It's like that kind of energy work to really get to the heart of issues so that people can move on. And then I kind of fell into this is what you should do. And I fell into like the online business coaching and got caught up in the advertising because it was all quite shiny and new back then.
Yeah.
Oh, again, another age thing. And I started doing things that I thought I should be doing, which is against everything I'd been teaching myself to my own clients. But because this like whole online world was opening up, I started like investing in these big programs and going, oh, this is what I should do. So then I kind of went away from like my first love. And now 17 years later, I'm almost back to the beginning.
Yay!
But much wiser and going, oh my goodness, how obviously, everything has been valuable and everything that I've learned, especially the skills, but the way that I deliver my work has that's the bit that's really gone full circle. And that's the bit, as irony would have it, 17 years ago, I was talking to women about trusting that intuition, and this is how you tap into it, and this is how you create the life that you really feel passionate about living. And yet I was doing that in my own life, but I wasn't doing it in my business. And it's taken me all that time to go, every time my business has worked, it's because I've done it the way that I felt was right, even if it went against the mainstream teachings of the time. And every time I followed that formula or had an expert copywriter write me a sales page, has been my least signups. And yet my biggest programs have been when I've just been like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. There's a sign up page. And it's been like a paragraph. And I'm like, I'm going to get around to writing it later. And yet the signups have just flowed in. And I'm like, oh, there's something in this, isn't there? And of course there is.
Of course there is. It's when it comes from your heart. It's when it comes from following your gut instinct, your intuition, that we're really stepping into our power and doing what we should be doing rather than kind of following the blueprints that other people have created. And I think that's a massive, massive challenge. I think especially for women entrepreneurs, because it's so easy to listen to these kind of big internet rock stars and think, oh, well, she's got the secret. But really, we've got the secret.
Yeah. And, there have been times when I'm just like, someone just tell me what to do. That's easier rather than owning the fact that I have my own answers. It's much easier to go, here's some cash, tell me what to do. And actually, that's always been the biggest failures with a little F. That's when things haven't worked out the best for me.
Exactly. It's completely my story as well. And that's why last year I wrote a book called Business Intuition, because I realized what I needed to do was just stop listening to other people and stop handing my power over to other people and start listening to my own intuition, because that's when things go right.
Yeah. And I think it was harder. It can be harder for women, especially if you're trying to explain it to, in my case, it was a husband, actually my ex-husband now, but that's not the reason. And he was, very traditional, very successful businessman that came from, a very traditional business background. You did your profit and loss, you did your, SWOT analysis, you did this, and this. And if I, for me to turn around and go, oh, it just doesn't feel right to do that. It was a different language we were talking, and it led for some interesting conversations. And for me to stand in my own power and say, no, this is how I'm going to be doing this, and that's okay for me. I know you don't understand it whatsoever, so I'm just not even going to run anything past you by now. Not that I don't respect your input, but I actually have to. It's almost like you have to protect your own little baby, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Because
until it's got its roots to go, look, I said it would work. Yes. Here's the proof.
Because there's so many people who are willing to weigh in with their advice and their opinions. And
everyone's an expert.
Yeah. But really, we're the only ones who are the experts on our own stuff. Because if we're following an intuitive-based business, you can't go wrong with that, really.
No.
So what would you say are some of your biggest challenges or mindset stuff that came up for you, in addition to this whole not following your intuition thing, as you were building your business?
I think, to be honest, that was the biggest mindset, was to trust myself. I've always been a hugely intuitive person, even though I didn't have the language when I was a child to explain that. But as I got older, it was kind of like, oh, I need to trust my intuition, and I could do that in every aspect of my life. But when it came to business, it was kind of like, oh, but other people know better. And so my biggest mindset was to really come back to trusting myself again, and knowing that to connect with my own feelings was the right thing to do.
So would you say that was kind of the tipping point in your business where things just started flowing?
Yeah. And people talk a lot about going from, hustle to flow. And that really was my tipping point, is when I stopped trying to follow the hustle and, you have to get people to sign up to this so that you can do this many emails, and then you have the sales, and then you have the soft, sell, and then you have the hard sell. And as soon as I got out of that mindset of how things should be, and I just went with okay, this is what feels right for me. It still has structure, but it has lots of fluidity for me to be creative. So that really was for me, like, from that hustle and overwhelming mindset of being on like 50 million people's email lists, all with their free gifts and pink spoons, and trying to follow like the industry leaders, to going, shush, I don't need any of that noise. I'm just gonna tap into what I feel is the right thing to offer, and get really clear on the kind of people that I want to work with, and call in that energy, because I don't want to work with everybody. I don't want to, I was about to say, trick, in inverted commas, people. I hate that people sometimes use the word tripwire, don't they, for a free gift. I hate that expression. It makes me cringe. I don't want to trick people. I certainly don't want to be tripping them over. I want to give them a hand up. I'm like, come join us. So for me, it was about fostering the idea of a community rather than sales. And I love building community. I love gathering women, which is, why I think the red tents are really important as well. But it's that kind of connection and collaboration. And when I had that mindset, which, like I said, I'd had everywhere in every other aspect of my life. And when I started my journey of kinesiology, quite often my clients would go, I'm going to learn how to be a kinesiologist. Do you mind? I was like, no, that's fantastic. Because the more of us are, because 17, 18 years ago, people were like, what? How do you pronounce that? And people have heard of kinesiology these days, much more, but I still get what on earth is that? And so back then I'm like, no, the more of us there are, the more of us can spread the word, because I totally come from the right people will still come to see me, and the right people will find you, but there's more of us.
Exactly.
So that's great. So I had that at the very beginning, and then I went through this whole, oh my goodness, I've got to have a niche, and I can't do the same as anyone else. And it got into this really odd, like almost scarcity mindset about business, to going back to the beginning now, going, yes, the more we collaborate and the more we share, the better it is for everybody. Everybody wins that way.
Yeah, I completely agree. So at what point in your business journey did you get into red tents? And I need to ask this, make this into a compound question. What are red tents for our listeners who might not know what they are?
Well, traditionally, a red tent is a space that's kind of like a grown-up timeout for women, but in a positive sense. Somewhere where women can rest and be nurtured. And the whole idea of the red tent in my opinion. And it's kind of like this womb space, it's that cavernous space where you can just go and disconnect from the responsibilities of the outside world and just be in a place that's held for women so they can rest and be nurtured. So in a red tent, people would, you might go for a couple of hours and there'll be like massage there. They'll be talking, and a place to actually be witnessed and not judged. So a place where you can actually just talk about whatever you want. And it's, it's very woman orientated. So, quite often that, it's like, well, there was a book called The Red Tent, and it was a red tent where women went when they had their period. So when you have your period, ideally, you should at least take some time to rest. Yeah. And it's that place where you would go and just surrender and just rest, and people would come and look after you. And I know it's just like the idea of just being looked after sometimes just sounds really lovely in today's hectic world.
Yeah.
And that's kind of changed, just to be a space where women come together, just to be held. They have food, they might sing songs, and it's just a space where nothing is expected of you. You participate or you don't. But although I'm having a yurt built and I will have a physical space, I actually hold these spaces online. And again, it's just, for me, it is just a place to come and rest and just reconnect with your own rhythms of life, but also the rhythms of the external world. So I always hold my red tents on a new moon and a full moon. And for me, that's allowing women to honour the fact that we ebb and flow. So we have the ebb and flow of the moon. We see this very much in how the tides move. But we also have the ebb and flow of our own energies. And I think sometimes when we have our period or at the dark moon, we need to rest and retreat. And I think sometimes when we feel that we want to rest and retreat, we can feel flaky because maybe like a week ago we were like, go, 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 go. And we had all these amazing ideas, and suddenly we want to rest. And we're like, were they bad ideas or am I just a flake? And then 2 weeks later, your energy's up again. So, maybe you're ovulating or it's the full moon and you're like, yay, creation's back. Go, 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 go. And it's like, you're not being crazy. You're not being high maintenance. You're just tapping into your own rhythm of life around you or your own internal rhythms. And so by having the red tents twice a month, it just reminds people that we do ebb and flow throughout the month. Now, this is a space where you come and rest and connect. Now, every entrepreneur that I know, every woman in business needs some more of that rest time. And I often explain it like, well, where do you get your best ideas? They're not where you're racing around the supermarket generally. They'll be just as you're about to fall asleep or when you're in the shower. It's when you're having that place of stillness, because you can't create you can't create change when you're stressed. You have to have that downtime. You have to have that relaxation.
Yeah, I think so many people recognize that they have such great thoughts in the shower or when they're walking somewhere. But it's like, we know that, but I think not enough people make the time to allow that space so that things can come through, ideas and creativity and, just rest. And
I think one of the main reasons is in our current culture, we value busyness. How are you? I'm busy. It's almost like it's a justifiable reason you can't do other things. And people feel guilty about just taking an hour of downtime. Oh, I can't do that. I have to achieve. And we only value things that are achieved rather than going, I'm going to take today, or I'm going to take an hour today. I'm just going to dream. I'm just going to amble along the riverside. And it's kind of that can be seen as wasteful or even indulgent. And it's like, when did we get to, how did we create a world where, enjoying resting or dreaming or walking through the woods is a luxury, or indulgent?
Yeah, it's funny because I find myself like, intellectually, I understand that, but it's still really, really hard for me sometimes to allow myself that time. And that's why my word of the year for this year is allow, because I still find myself pushing, rather than just allowing myself to have the time and the space for things to happen. It's a big challenge for me.
It's how we've been brought up, though. It's what everything around us tells us to do. And when you go against that grain, it's really, really hard, especially because you have other people judging, but also you judge yourself. You know, I mean, how many times might you have looked at someone and just gone, oh gosh, look how lazy they are. You know, or what could I have done in that time? You know, we are just as guilty of that. However, when you make the time to have that rest, to reconnect to who you are, to really honor your creative times and your down times, you become so much more productive. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I had my little boy, was he nearly 3 years ago, I suddenly became super productive because I didn't have the luxury of loads of time. Mm-hmm. You know, quite honestly, like I look back now before I had my son, and I'm like, how on earth did I waste so much time? You know, it might take me like a week to put something together, and suddenly with a little baby, I could do that same amount of work in 2 hours because you cut away all the noise. And I think when you tap into your intuition and you have the confidence to trust that and the inner conviction, which is like any other skill, it takes practice. You do the same thing. You can cut out the noise and you can just hone in. So by taking that time to rest allows you the energy to be more creative. Yeah. And I'll say, I'm sure you must have done this before, that I was really good at not being in the mood to do something, but feeling like I should.
Yes.
So 3 hours later, I still hadn't done anything, or it was a piece of rubbish that I'd created, and I should have just gone for a walk, or I should have just taken the afternoon off. But I instinctively knew that, but I felt guilty about giving myself permission to do that.
Yes. And that, I think, is the biggest thing. It's all about giving ourselves permission to take time and space out of the hustle and bustle to just have space.
Have space, yeah. And I think that we've just lost that connection to, you know, I don't know if you've heard the term like the women's mysteries, about reconnecting to the magic that makes us women. And yes, men have their own as well. And I'm certainly not anti-men. I love my men. But, you know, it's very much about honoring the fact that I'm a woman and really connecting into that ancient wisdom of the intuitive side, of the creative side, and just embracing all of those aspects and knowing that they come and go throughout the month, throughout the day, certainly throughout the year.
Yeah. You know? And I think the red tent reminds us of that. As you've said earlier, you do it in the new moon, the full moon. It reminds us of our cycles and that we have these cycles. I know for years, I was never kind of the, I love my period kind of woman. I've never loved it.
What, you didn't go rollerblading with your Dalmatian in your white pants?
No, I didn't.
In your white trousers?
No, I didn't.
Oh, surprised me.
No, yeah. And so I just kind of rejected that side of me. And it wasn't until I read Lisa Lister's book, Code Red, that I finally started tracking my cycle and realizing, yes, there's an ebb and flow in my energy. There's an ebb and flow in my concentration levels. There are some weeks where I can't concentrate. I can't get anything done. But 2 weeks later, I am on fire. Like my brain is just like hyper-focused. I will do everything. So it's about allowing myself and giving myself permission to have that ebb and flow.
Yeah, and the red tent is really about reconnecting to that understanding of exactly as you said. If you're not feeling it and you have charted and you can recognize it, brilliant. I know that for me, when I chart, I'm just like, oh God, I feel really like antsy today. And I'll look and I'll be like, oh yeah, it's that time of the moon, or it's actually that time of my menstrual cycle. And I'm like, and then it's okay. It's okay if you feel antsy because I know it's going to pass. Yeah. And then I can kind of calm, you know, if someone's annoyed me a little bit more than really they should have done, that's my issue. And I recognize that. And so it takes me out of like, I don't know, getting into some kind of debate with someone because I'm just like, oh, it's me. I'm just being hypersensitive. Yeah. Or I can call myself out on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and also it's really good for planning. I know that with Lisa, for example, that she does nothing on the first day of her period. Whereas for me, I still might do something, but I'm aware that if it's the new moon or the first day of my period, that affects my energy in a particular way. So I can, if I have to do something on those days, I can put the support in that I need. So for me, it's not so much about I will only do like the creating on the full moon because that's when the height of the creation is. It's just like, oh, I know that I have this coming up and I've got a choice of when I could do this. I'm going to pick that day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it's about just being aware of how you can support yourself in everyday business.
Yes. And what I found really useful is I actually block out the first day of my cycle. So I have a kind of a recurring block in my calendar every 26 days.
Nice.
In red.
Perfect. What does that tell yourself about how much you're willing to honor who you are and how you show up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, whether you look at it as like, that's the message you're giving to the universe, or even just that's the respect you're giving to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's hugely powerful.
Yeah. And
that really is about embodying your empowerment.
Yes. And it was really difficult for me to do that as well, because I was like, again, giving myself permission to block out a day in my calendar. Often it falls between the Monday through Friday. How dare I block out a day?
That's right, because you have to work 9 till 5, Monday to Friday.
Exactly.
Even though you're an entrepreneur making your own rules.
Exactly. And even though I don't work, 9 to 5, I work like 11 to 7. So I already have late hours. But yeah, that was a big stretch for me. And so what I started doing to kind of force myself to take that time out was I henna my hair, like the gray hair, I henna it. So that's a 6-hour process. So I henna my hair, which is red, on the same day that I have my first day of my cycle. And so that forces me to like stay at home with like mud in my hair and not do anything. Yeah, and that's how I convinced myself to do it.
But that's creating a beautiful ritual for yourself in honoring your divine feminine, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have your period, you have the way that you look, you want to look a certain way. That's just perfect.
And it's all red.
Even more amazing.
So tell us, Rebecca, how can maybe women who have never heard of red tents before, they've heard of them but never attended, women who are listening to this show, how can they go about either connecting with you and doing your virtual red tents or doing a kind of an in-person red tent? Where should they go next?
Probably the easiest place would be to go to my website, which is yourshirosjourney.com. And on there, I have loads of free resources. I have like free programs and a couple of free Facebook groups, which one is very moon focused. So if you're interested in learning more about the moon, every single day there's a journal prompt in relation to the moon. Ooh. And so that just like reconnects you back into, this is the energy of the day and this is where the moon cycle is. And the amount of people are just like, oh, thank goodness that you've posted that. I understand why I'm feeling this way. And then I have another one that's more of a red tent group, which is where you can come and join the free online red tents. They last about an hour, which is just perfect. We do like meditations and I have readings and we do some energy clearing that's relevant for the moon phase, the particular moon as well. But in that space, it's more about allowing women the space just to get things off their chest or just to say things. So it's not really a space where you'd come for advice, although of course there's a beautiful bunch of women in there and you might just say, I need some help. How would you deal with this? But really it's just a place to be witnessed. So yeah, you can get all that information from my website.
Excellent. And when will you be starting your yurt-based in-person red tents?
I know, I'm so excited. It will probably be July of this year because it's being made at the moment.
Oh, lovely. How exciting.
So yeah, I know. I'm just like, come on, make it faster. But I just missed out. They just had a big order and then mine's after that. I'm like, oh shucks. So I'm also learning patience. Yes. And interestingly, it will be ready just in time for summer, which is like the big creation, isn't it? If you take it out. Yeah. So as always, everything does work out perfectly.
So, Rebecca, do you have any women business mentors? Are there any women entrepreneurs who inspire you?
That is a really good question. I was thinking about this, and I think over time it's changed. Yep. And at the moment, I'm probably in between people that I would really in particular like to work with. Mm-hmm. But women that I really love what they're putting out in the world right now, it's people like Elizabeth Gilbert or Brené Brown or even Danielle Laporte, people that are just really speaking from the heart. Mm-hmm. And when you read their words, they just resonate with so many women that, they're willing to be vulnerable, to speak their truth, regardless of what other people are going to say. Mm-hmm. And so I love watching the process that they're going through.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, as you said, speaking from the heart, it's just so powerful. And I think it's so easy to see these women and think, oh, what is it that they have that magnetizes so many people to them? But it's exactly that. It's them just opening up and writing from the heart and speaking from the heart and just sharing that openly.
Yeah, and I think the word authentic has been kind of overused in our industry a little, but it is that kind of congruence, is that you know that when they're talking, the whole energy is aligned.
Yes.
And I think in particular as women, that we can read stuff and it not quite resonate, but the words are like beautifully crafted, but it's just not quite resonating. And that's when I think people have tried to be too formulaic in what they're sharing. They're like, oh yeah, this person has done X, Y, and Z. I need to do X, Y, and Z. And that's why it won't work for us, because it's not, it's not how we should be working. And that's without doubt the hardest thing that I've had to learn is that just to show up as me, because I can't be anyone else.
Yeah.
I would much, a few years ago, I'd much rather followed someone's formula.
Yes.
And then go,
easier.
oh, but it didn't work. It's like, oh, surprise. So yeah, those women that are just willing to show up and no matter what, and just share it all. They're the women that inspire me most. But, every woman. They don't have to be, famous with a huge following. Just women that show up every day. And of course, we're not always 100% perfect. But those women that do show up, regardless, and are just unapologetically them, because that's like the biggest act of rebellion these days, isn't it? I think just being ourselves.
And it's just such a lovely way of being rebellious too. It's not just being you, not blending in with the crowd, not being beige, just doing your thing.
Yeah. And even just discovering who you are.
Yes.
And allowing yourself the time to discover who you are. Which sounds crazy. It's like such a, new problem to have, isn't it? It's like, why am I here? What's my purpose? But we've become so disconnected, and we've allowed ourselves to be so shaped by the thoughts and expectations of other people. It has been easy to forget who we really are and what those passions were before we thought we should go to university to get the degree, then get married, then have the job, then have the children, and then should. Then look after the aging parents, and then do every kind of club and learn several languages and whatever else has been expected of us. Yeah.
That's tough to escape and kind of go back to the core. So how can other women entrepreneurs work with you in addition to the whole online Red Tens?
I have several programs. One is starting in end of March, beginning of April, and that's going to be a cyclical journey through the wheel of the year. Ooh. And so, that's really about learning to understand how the nature is reflected in our own body and how we can tap into our Shiro superpowers and what each of those seasons brings to us and how we can really harness that energy to understand how we're showing up in the world and, of course, with our businesses, and how we can kind of, I don't like the word balance because it's not really about a balance. It's more about finding your own rhythm. And then I have another program which you can just come and join for a month or stay for as long as you like. And that's really about, it's called Dream Wild. And that's really about getting in touch with your biggest dreams and learning how to harness the energy of the moon. Because one of the reasons I love the moon is that every 28 days we get to start again. It's like, if you like any course you've done, you're like, oh no, I've missed a few weeks. It doesn't matter. The moon does not care. We just, every 28 days, we just start again. And we've just got this like beautiful calendar in the sky to help us reconnect and like I said, harness that energy of the moon so that we know when we're resting and dreaming. We know when we're going to be most creative. We know when the energy is rising, and we know when it's time to retreat. So if any of that interests people, they would just like to get in tune with their own rhythms.
Yay. And also,
so all on my website.
Yes, which you've already shared with us. And you also have a podcast. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast?
I love my podcast. My podcast, Your Shiro's Journey. It's just recently gone through a bit of a makeover. So we've got about 40 episodes of amazing Shiros, including yourself, sharing their own journey of the Shiro. So, all the obstacles they've overcome, the challenges and the wins that they had. So really, the first season is all about really following their call. The second season was about people sharing their gifts with the world and like how we can use like feng shui or color to really create the life that we want. And now this season is about getting people to take action. Ooh. So there's like monthly challenges. We've got guest speakers come on to talk about, like we just had one about collaboration and why it's so important to tune in with nature and why collaboration is so important, particularly now. And then because it was the Aquarian new moon, we had the Rebel. So we had a challenge about embracing your inner rebel. And one lady who was 40 went and pierced her nose. So she won the prize.
Yay!
She said she'd wanted to do it ever since she was younger, but she felt too old. So she went off and pierced her nose, which is fabulous.
Oh, I love that. That's so funny.
Of course, it doesn't have to be as dramatic as that.
That's so funny because I have my nose pierced. And I recently ran into a woman who's probably in her early 60s, whom I'd met about 2 years ago at this workshop. And when I saw her again last year, her nose was pierced. And she said, I was inspired by you. She said, I'd always wanted to do it. And then I saw yours and it was so pretty and it was just very small and dainty. And so I just went out and did it. And I was like, yes!
But that's the truth of it, isn't it? When we show up as ourselves, we have no idea the influence and impact that we're having on other people. Yeah. But to do that, we need to be authentic, first of all.
Yes. And it's funny because I'd always felt like I'm 43 years old. I kind of feel like sometimes maybe I'm too old to have my nose pierced, but I love it. I know it's ridiculous, but I love it. And I was so happy to hear her story because I thought, well, that's good. I'm not too old.
That's magic right there, though, isn't it? But that's the power of women gathering.
Yes, it is.
You know, we really do give other people permission when they see us do it first.
Yes.
So yeah.
I love it.
Magic.
Yay. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I loved chatting about red tents with you. And as I think I've told you before, not on this call, but previously, I've still never been to a red tent. So I think I'm going to have to sign up for your virtual red tents and join you on the next one. I will.
You'll be very, very welcome. Yay. So yeah, look out for the full moons.
I will. Thank you. So thank you for joining us today. And thank you for listening. And remember to visit hollywharton.com/191 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Business Mindset Podcast with your host, Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed at hollywharton.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to head over to iTunes and leave a quick review of this podcast. It just takes a minute. Thank you.